special coverage. Joining us for a special hour of the Climate Challenge. I'm Mike Bettis.
And I'm Alex Wilson. Reactions still coming in after President Trump's announcement. And over the next hour, we are going to discuss what this decision means for climate change, not just in our country, but also globally.
First, more on the decision, joined by Chris Warren to talk about this. A lot to ingest today, Chris.
Bringing Catherine Wilkinson now on the discussion. So what does this announcement mean for the push that's already underway for alternative energy? We've heard from business leaders, from other decision makers. They're not going to stop.
I think that's exactly right. What we've seen is that most of the progress we've made in the U.S. around climate has been in spite of the federal government, or at least in the absence of its encouragement and acceleration. The leaders are going to keep leading. The solutions to address climate change, they've already left the station. And the businesses, the cities, the states that have been so active in pushing forward progress, that's going to continue.
And we've already heard from a lot of those leaders almost immediately saying, New York City, yesterday we heard from Mayor Walsh in Boston saying, we're not going to stop this. So now does it become a more localized initiative?
I think that's incredibly likely, and I think we will see the impact of having this galvanize efforts at the state level, at the city level, in businesses and communities.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation coming up, but I want to let you guys know, if you've got questions, comments, we'd love to hear them. You can tweet us using the hashtag Weather Channel, also the hashtag Paris Agreement. We are going to continue our coverage, of course, as President Donald Trump has made that decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. We're going to talk about what this means in regards to the American military.
The conversation, Catherine Wilkinson with Project Drawdown. Ted Halstead, by the way, the founder and CEO of Climate Leadership Council and CEO of American Security Project, Steve Cheney. Ted, I want to start with you.
And I want to bring in Catherine here because that has always been an argument in leaving, is saying, it hurts the American economy. Perhaps this actually could stimulate companies to take matters into their own hands.
I think so. There's a clear climate reality that we've been talking about, and there's also an economic reality to the situation, but it's not the economic reality that we heard articulated from the White House today. Addressing climate change doesn't hinder the economy, quite to the contrary. The solutions for reversing global warming accelerate the economy. They create jobs, they spur innovation, they generate prosperity. The research that we've done at Project Drawdown suggests that pursuing the most significant solutions to climate change between now and 2050 could realize almost $75 trillion of savings for the world. Wow. That's an economic opportunity I want America at the front seat of.
Let me ask you, joining us now, one of the authors is Catherine Wilkinson, along with Dr. Nava and Dr. Navarro. How do we do it then? How do we draw down those emissions? How do we appease the president and be viable economically and wean ourselves off of fossil fuels?
So the good news is that humanity is already on the case. We have a lot of work to do, but we have the technologies, we have the practices, the technical capability to get to the point that we're pulling more greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere than we're sending up into it. It exists. It's clear. So the question then is, how do we accelerate that scaling? We clearly see that enlightened governments around the world are able to do that acceleration, but that's not the only way, I think, to put your pedal to the metal, so to speak.
Absolutely, and I think you're saying, a lot of people are really inspired by what they've learned. I was talking to Dr. Navarro a little bit about this. We hear from people who are not necessarily for climate change, and they say the Earth goes through cycles. But I think we can all agree that if we can limit the amount of stuff that we're putting into the atmosphere, that has to be a good thing.
I don't think there's any debate on how the greenhouse effect works. I mean, that, as a scientist, we know if we're putting more carbon dioxide in the air, it's a greenhouse gas, it's going to warm the planet. That's the reason why we can actually have life on this planet, because it would be too cold otherwise. Right. So if we're continuously pumping that into the atmosphere, we're going to have an effect. So I don't see how it would be a bad thing to ask that question and consider what impact we could be having, regardless of the changing climate.
Water vapor. H2O water vapor is technically a greenhouse gas. It's not something that humans are putting into the atmosphere necessarily, but it's an unintended consequence, right?
Yeah, and another thing that's happened, you can't just make big changes now and then the atmosphere responds right away. So we got to get ahead of the game. And that's why it's so important for some kind of solution to be globally accepted and implemented, because we all are going to affect what these scenarios.
And Catherine, you talk about being a global leader and how, you know, in your opinion, U.S. really should be at the table. We know this is going to be something that people use moving forward. And so by stepping out, taking us out of the table, is that a problem? But also, does this really incite businesses to say, no, we're not going to let you stop us. We're going to actually continue our efforts to be ahead?
I think it's a mistake to have virtually the entire global community at the table discussing the future of this planet that we call home, and to pull out of that, right? To not be part of that conversation seems to me a sort of fundamental political miscalculation. I also think when we come into this issue thinking about the solutions, addressing greenhouse gases is just one of the benefits. There are so many things, as you flip through the pages of Drawdown or look through our website, solutions that we would want to pursue regardless of their impact on greenhouse gases. And I think when we start to realize so many positive ripple effects, it's hard to walk away.
Right.